Is it the end of US dollar? We are going to do it in completely factual and data-based manner. No personal bias, no individual opinion. Let's just look at the facts. Point number one, why this question? Why are we even talking about it? American dollar has enjoyed the status of reserve currency in the world for almost 80 years now. The new world order that was created after the Second World War, based on the IMF and the IBRD, that was based on the dollar supremacy. And after that, the petrodollar agreement that America had with some of the countries in West Asia, like Saudi Arabia, UAE, etc., that further cemented the status of American dollar. So, American dollar is still the most common currency used in global trade and still the most common currency in other countries' forex reserves. So, why are we even talking about? Are we looking at a decline? So, the answer is yes. So, dollar is still the largest reserve currency, almost 58% of the forex reserves in other countries. So it still enjoys a very good reputation and a dominant status. However, the point is nearly 25 years ago, the US dollar had 72% share in the forex reserves of other countries. So this is a decline of nearly 15%. It's a big decline that cannot be ignored. From here, another 15% decline would mean the dollar will no longer be the most dominant currency. There might be good competitors to it. A 15-20% decline further would mean the US is no longer absolutely dominant currency. So this is a very clear symbol of the dollar's decline. It is a sign that gives us a direction, and that's why we raise the question. Now, if we look at it in terms of composition, if countries are giving away US dollar, then which currencies are they shifting to? So, for that, the answer is gold. More and more countries are now shifting to gold, and this is the reason why gold prices have nearly doubled in last 1 year. Gold was around 70,000 1 year ago, and today it is touching 1.5 lakh rupees in Indian rupees terms in 10 grams. So the gold prices have nearly doubled, and this is because the more and more central banks across the world are buying more and more gold, and they are giving up on dollar. So gold is becoming the alternative. Some countries are even looking at bitcoins or other cryptocurrencies. However, their number is very few and the amount of trade is also relatively small. But dominantly, it is the gold. And countries like China, India, Brazil, Germany, Russia, all of these have sold a lot of US dollars in the global market in last 1 year. So this is a very clear signal. China alone has offloaded nearly $500 billion worth of American treasury bonds in the global markets. So, this is a very serious development which really affects the value of dollar. It will not affect the immediate exchange rate, but it will affect the confidence in dollars. It will give a signal to investors that not everyone trusts American dollar today, and there might be a big change in future. Okay, the dollar's share in forex reserves is consistently falling. Now, the dollar, although is still dominant, it still enjoys a big status. There is no other currency definitely which is anywhere in comparison. But the point is, it is not about any other currency replacing dollar. It is only the dollar which is losing its status. So yen, yuan, renminbi, or which is the official name of the yuan actually. And if you look at the British pound, if you look at the euro or some of the other currencies, they're not replacing dollar. It's not that other countries are selling dollars and loading up those currencies. It's about more and more diversification. They are not going for a single currency, but they're actually adopting multiple currencies. They're selling certain dollars, buying majorly gold. Other than gold, they're trying to maintain a mix of the six, seven major global economies. So in small amount, they're buying different currencies. So that is a big change here. And why does this matter? Because the global trade is dependent on dollars, and dollar value, if it goes up and down, it can very strongly affect the fortunes of the traders, the importers, exporters, and even those people who invest globally or those who deal in forex. So it affects everyone. So the forex reserves and the investment flows, the global trade, and even the debt servicing costs for the countries, all of that get affected in the process. Then, if we look at the US Treasury bond yield, this is a very clear indicator. American Treasury yield used to be one of the lowest in the world, somewhere close to Germany and just after Japan. How much interest do Japan pay? If they borrow $100 every year, they have to pay close to $2.2 per $100. Germany pays close to $2.86 per $100. In comparison, America is now paying $4.24. This is not how it used to be. Let us look at this. So, American treasury rates used to be quite low. And if you look at the 10-year treasury, it used to be under 4 just 15 years ago. And it used to enjoy a very low interest rate around 35, 40 years ago. So I'm not talking about 5 years trend here. I'm talking about a 40-year period in which American bond yields have gone from one of the lowest in the world to somewhere in the average. I'm not saying it is very high, because if you look at some of the other countries, for example, BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, and South Africa. There is no China in this data, but let's say if you look at some of the other countries, then Brazil has to pay more than 13, or let's say close to $14 for every $100. Russia has to pay close to $15. India has to pay close to $6.50. Okay, so compared to all these countries, the American bond is still low. But the point is, while American bond yields have been increasing consistently, America has to pay more and more interest. Countries like India have been able to bring down their bond yield in the long run. So India earlier used to pay 7 to 8% bond yield, and the yield is consistent, not consistently, but in a cycle. Overall, if we look at a long-term trend, it has declined. In 40 years, if we see, the bond yields have declined very significantly. Meanwhile, the American bond yields have gone up. Let's say at one point of time, bond yield in India was 4 times compared to USA. Today, it is 1.5 times. So that tells you the story. Then South Africa is close to 8.25. Mexico is close to 9.2. So among the developing countries, actually, it is India which is performing better than most of other countries in terms of yield. And in Europe, yield is somewhere close to 3.5. Okay. So among all of that, US yield is relatively high today if we look at the comparative countries. That means the debt burden on America is increasing, the debt servicing burden is increasing, and every year the deficit will further increase. And this means the American dollar will be printed more and more, and it will come in more and more supply in global markets. And this means its value, once it starts declining, it will go down consistently. So, what are the drivers of the shift? Why this is happening? So, the big reason is, first of all, geopolitical tensions and sanctions. The world is no longer how it used to be. Earlier, there were isolated conflicts, small scale conflicts, and relatively a manageable level of violence. But in the last 5 years, how many theaters of war we have seen? And that is alarming. A large scale war between Russia and Ukraine. So many people are dying every day, and that war has its cost on the global economy. Then we recently saw a small skirmish between India and Pakistan, which is a skirmish after almost 27 years. So that was also unprecedented, but it did happen, and it has also had increased its cost. And then we see a consistent and long conflict between Israel and Hamas and the other Palestinian players. And that is also a big cost. In between, we have seen a lot of violence in Iran and lot of violence in its supported countries. So all of that means that world is no longer in a managed way, because America's ability to control the global conflicts is falling. And that means the trust in America's ability is also falling. And that trust, if it falls, it affects the dollar also. Meanwhile, if you remember, there was a conflict between Cambodia and the Thailand also. And there were so many other conflicts. For example, there was a conflict in South Sudan, and it was a major conflict, by the way. More people die in that than even the Russia-Ukraine war. So many different conflicts are going on. And if US is not able to control that, it directly affects the prestige of America, and dollar's prestige is directly related to that. Then forex reserves diversification. I've already told you forex reserve diversification is taking place because although other countries believe, everyone believe that American dollar is not going to crash or American economy is not going to crash. It is going slightly down, but that is in relative terms. Its share in the global economy is going down. That's what we mean. But overall, it is still expanding. So that means the decline of America will be very slow and contained. It will never crash. It will not become another UK after the Second World War situation. So America will still remain a giant. So that's why they still trust the American dollar, but they want to hedge their risk. So they're diversifying away. They're trying to keep a lot of dollars, but at the same time, they want to have a safe bet on gold. They want to have safe bet on some of the other currencies and assets. So that is what we mean by diversification here. Then debate over the debt sustainability. American debt is at a record level. American debt has crossed 130%, and that's only the federal debt. If you combine the federal and the provincial debt or the state debt, then it is almost 160 to 70%. So that's alarmingly high. The American deficit is close to $1.7 trillion. So that much high debt affects any country. It raises a question mark in terms of its credibility. And as a result, America even lost its credit rating last year. Moody's downgraded the American bonds credit rating also. So that also affects. Then the new trade arrangements. So more and more countries are now getting into non-dollar based trade. For example, earlier there was an understanding that if Saudi Arabia, UAE, Oman, Qatar, if these countries are going to sell their oil, they will always accept dollar in exchange. American dollar to be specific, obviously. But today they are directly accepting the Chinese currency. They are accepting some of the other mode of payment. So in a way, the petrodollar equation is also no longer there. Then many other countries are directly dealing in their own currencies and not using dollar for trade payments. For example, Russia and China, Russia and India, and it's not just these. There are so many others. So these currency swap agreements, Vostro Nostro agreements, all of that also affects. So these trade agreements and the non-dollar trade is also affecting. And then the reset transactional demand for dollar at the margin. It reduces the demand for dollar because if you're going to trade directly in your own currency, why do you need dollar? So it will reduce its demand. And once demand reduces, that means importance is reducing. Alternative payment and settlement system, this is what I was talking about. Okay, so they are settling payments in their own currencies. They have even created alternatives to the global payment system, the Swift system, etc. So this is the new reality. And objective of all these countries is resilience. They are not looking for replacement of dollar. Be very clear on that. They are not looking for replacement. They are not looking that our currency can replace dollar. Nobody has this idea in mind. China is also very clear that their currency strength is quite limited. And if they can use their currency for their own trading, even in half of the cases, that is more than good enough right now. Okay. So what they are looking for is diversification and resilience. So another big reason for which I've kept a separate slide here is the Donald Trump's phenomenon. This Trump era impact is accelerating everything. All those factors that I've mentioned earlier, they have been there for last 20 years. But the de-dollarization was not happening very fast. It was not a very big phenomena, but Donald Trump's actions have accelerated everything. So he has brought a big volatility in American trade policy. He has been very aggressive in his trade policy. He is applying tariffs left, right, and center almost on everyone. European friends, NATO friends, allies, countries like India, which have been among the close allies of USA, is under one of the highest tariffs of 50% right now. So this is something nobody expected, and this volatility has reduced the trust in USA. And if the trust in USA reduces, it also reduces in all the other institutions and assets related to USA, including US dollar. So there are frequent shifts in trade alliances, tariff structures, and diplomatic postures, and nobody, frankly, likes that. In addition to that, his foreign policy is also not acceptable to large number of global leaders. The way he attacked Venezuela, picked up Maduro, I'm not saying kidnapping, but let's say picked up Maduro, which is unprecedented, which is not legal as per any international law. And similarly, his rhetoric on Greenland, his rhetoric on so many other aspects is simply unnerving others. As a result, they are trying to disassociate, disengage, and let's say immune themselves to America as much as possible. It is not completely possible, but as much as possible. So there is a perception of policy uncertainty, and they want to reduce exposure. Okay, so Donald Trump has accelerated what was already on cards. Now, petrodollar that I earlier talked about. Petrodollar is a big development. It's not a small thing that can be ignored. Petrodollar was one of the key anchor of American policy. For example, the Second World War, when it ended, we had a new world order in which the Bretton Woods twins, which is basically the IMF and the IBRD, which is now known as the World Bank, they were the two bodies which were to lead the global economic system. And these two bodies were based on the idea of American dominance and the dollar supremacy. Dollar to be used as the international reserve currency. Implicitly, however, things changed later when France in the late 60s asked for gold in exchange of dollars. And in response to that, America ended the gold reserve system. And after that, the US dollar was made purely a fiduciary currency. And that means it is not backed up by any asset. And the gold standard it enjoyed earlier was no longer there. And the absence of gold standard meant the American dollar could slide. At that time, America actually rushed forward and signed agreement in West Asia with number of countries, which is largely Saudi Arabia, UAE, etc. That America will support all these countries. It will provide protection to them. And in exchange, these countries will sell their dollar in exchange of US dollar. They will accept US dollar as a payment of settlement. And America also created a big global firm today, which was then created, and that was Aramco, ARAMCO, and which is Arabic American company. So America invested in these countries. America made them rich also. But what was the condition? That dollar will be used for payments. So the American dollar maintained its status, and petrodollar played a big role in that. However, today the Saudi Arabia, UAE are directly settling the oil trade in Chinese currency. And American foreign policy is also in response, is responsible for that. For example, the unnecessary, completely uncalled for intervention and unnecessary heat with Saudi Arabia on the Khargoshi murder issue. Sorry, I'm not able to pronounce the name correctly. Okay, so there was a diplomatic tension between USA and Saudi Arabia, and that was one of the critical factor because of which Saudi Arabia grew increasingly irritated of America, and that is why they decided to ultimately walk away from petrodollar. And this itself is a major development, and it can completely change the situation. If right now it's China, in future if more and more countries sign such agreement with the West Asian countries, then the dollar will quickly lose its importance. Not completely lose, but lose to some extent. Then historical precedents. Is it for the first time that a currency is going to lose its dominant status? No. We've seen this so many times in past. Pound used to be the dominant currency, the reserve currency of the world before the Second World War. But it lost dominance, or it lost its status to the American dominance. And dollar became the dominant currency after the World War II, and which is what I was talking about as the new world order under the IMF. So pound sterling lost its status after enjoying nearly 150 years at the pinnacle. Before that, it was the Dutch guilder, which was displaced by pound. And before that, we have seen a similar fall between regarding the French francs and the German papier mark, Deutschmark, etc. So number of currencies have fallen like that. And history tells us no power has been able to rule forever. What has risen is likely to come down as well. So it is inevitable. The point is at what speed, in what time frame, and who is going to replace. These questions are not yet clear. Okay. So common features of decline. First of all, the twin deficits, the trade deficit as well as the budget deficit or the fiscal deficit. America has both of them at record level, more than $1.5 trillion in each area. Then rise of new economic powers, which in this case is China, definitely. India is not yet anywhere in comparison to America. So I'm not saying it is a competitive power to America, but if it continues to grow like that, the way it is the fastest growing major economy in the world. If it grows like that for another 20 years, then it will also be in a position to not a challenge, but a competitor. Okay. And then a shift in the global trade and the reserve pattern. So when all of these happen simultaneously, we see a big change in the global system, and all of this is happening right now. So big change in global system is inevitable. The question is still the same: in what time frame, exactly when, in with what intensity, and who is going to replace the dollar? We do not know yet. Right now, they are favoring gold in exchange of dollar, some of the mix of other currencies in exchange of dollar. So there is no clear alternative yet. So dollar will still enjoy its status, I think, for considerable time. But the writing is on the wall. And USA is still strong structurally, but it has all of these problems. So with that, we can say the American dollar definitely will lose its status, but again, with how much intensity, in what time frame, and to whom, those things are yet to unfold. Gold is a diversifier, as I just said. Okay? And many global investors see a potential decline in global dollar reserve. So as a result, they are also going to sell it after a point of time, purely from investment risk point of view. So more and more uncertainty in America will create a higher risk profile, which can speed up the process. And right now, it is at a very high speed. So it is not yet the end of dollar. We do not even know whether dollar will end. I hope it doesn't end, frankly. But the evidence is it will no longer be absolutely dominant. And as I've said several times already towards the end of this video, the major question is with what intensity, in what time frame, and who replaces. That is yet to be unfolded. We have no clear answers yet, and only future will tell us.